Welcome to the Dr. Stacy Show, where we're talking about all things felt, faith, love, and wellness. I am your host, Dr. Stacy. I'm excited to be kicking off my inaugural season. Each season, we're going to tackle a theme, and this season, I've chosen healing Black men and lifting Black boys. I'll be taking the time to speak to incredibly talented and amazing Black men in their fields and profession to gain insight into key areas of wellness for how we can support with faith, love, and wellness our Black men and boys. So today, I am so honored to have with us Pastor Durell Robinson. And at the age of 16, Pastor Durell gave his life to Christ. He was filled with the Holy Spirit by the age of 18, and by the age of 24, he was already serving as an elder in his church. He is the proud husband of Ayana and proud father to Jason and Nathan. He founded Gatekeepers Enterprise Incorporated and is affectionately known as PD, or Senior Pastor of the Way Church. Pastor Durell in 2021 published his first book, The Power of the Second Seat, which he is now working on to re-release this year. Join me in welcoming Pastor Durell. Pastor Durell, thanks so much for being part of the show today.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Stacy. It's an honor to be here.
Well, listen, you and I did a pre-talk, and I am ready to dive in. So I have to let my listeners know. So one of the things, spiritual wellness, I have been in the dating pool on these dating apps, and every Black male is saying they're spiritual, not religious, not churchy. I love churchy, but spiritual. Talk to us a little bit today as a pastor. What are you seeing maybe that's keeping men from the church? What are you seeing as a senior pastor that might be causing Black men to run from church?
That is a wonderful observation. I do agree. There has been a definite lack of men in church overall. I think there's a few things that attribute to that. One, I love that you identified that men are claiming to be spiritual, but not religious. And I think that emphasizes the fact that although there has been a distance between men in church, there's still a sign that they're looking for answers. And so I think to that point, some of the things that are causing men to just not be in church at all is one, I think it's a lack of relevance. I don't think the church is really dealing with real life issues all the time that would make a man say, I want to be there. Because as men, and I can speak this way as a father, as a husband, and as a man, our sole prerogative is to provide, protect, and to be a resource for our family. So when we're not teaching men how to be better versions of just that, they're not going to come to church. So lack of relevance. And I think we just kind of lost that raw and honest space where men can be open about their trauma and not feel weak because of it. And I think that's something that the church can implement that would definitely bring some men back and bring them out of the space of just being spiritual and becoming disciples. Because I think that's the difference, right? There's not a lot of discipleship anymore.
And I love that you brought that up, because I know even before the show, we were talking about your book and the second seat and the idea of the different layers of leadership. Discipleship, for people that may be listening and saying, okay, we don't even know what that means. Can you talk a bit about where, not having men in leadership and discipleship, how does that impact even our churches?
It's a wonderful point. The effect of men not being discipled, I think it creates a ripple effect that affects not only families, but leadership and generational stability. And so whenever a man is out of place, unfortunately, there's a son that's going to suffer. And so discipleship in and of itself, I guess I'll give a really simple definition of discipleship. But discipleship is basically recreating a relationship or teaching someone a path or a way that you followed that you found successful, right? So Jesus tells us in the Bible, he doesn't say go make Christians, he says go make disciples. And a part of being a disciple is being disciplined. And so teaching men how to be disciplined. So when we remove men, inadvertently, we remove discipline. And when we remove discipline, church becomes unappealing because it becomes more petty and catty than it does spirit-filled and spirit-led.
You just nailed it. Listen, that catty, because even earlier when you said, well, first of all, let me go back, Pastor Durell, something you said. I have to give grace to those that are saying they're spiritual because they're looking for something. Okay, all right, I'm gonna give grace there. But I love how you're saying we need to also teach to the heart of men.
Yeah.
And the environment can't be catty. It can't be drama. And not that women are drama, but I'm just saying, right? It can't be catty. It can't be drama.
Yeah.
When we're talking as a The pastor, where do you see, I guess, where do you see that where we need to go in reaching men, and especially like Black men, when it comes to how we teach, how we outreach, what needs to look different?
I think one of the things we have to do, and this is one of the reasons why I love the ministry that you attend because you guys do this so much. But I think the church needs to be more missional and not just traditional,
Hmm.
right? The praise and worship offering, sermon, let's go home, it's good. But I think we have to really get men to rally around missions and not maintenance. Where when the men are in the church, can you fix this? Can you do this? As opposed to, can you step back into your God ordained place?
Oh, wait a
And
minute, pause,
mhm,
because somebody just needed to hear that. You said mission, not maintenance, because we
yeah,
tag our men for security, not missions, right? They're the
yeah,
team, they're fixing the flats, they're going to the, again,
exactly.
ooh, okay, I needed that. All right, Peter, you got this. Go ahead.
No, but that's exactly it. And one of the ways I believe, and I'm seeing this a lot at the Way Church now, the Lord is gracing us and finally sending some men, Dr. Stacy. I was worried for a while. We are still currently a very female dominant ministry, but God has been sending some men. And the secret that I believe that the Lord gave me that has been sending men was implementing strategy. And so strategy
Love that.
alone, I think, helps men want to be present. And so we launched service teams.
Mm,
And with service teams, it's not
mm,
just service as in doing things for people, but service
mm,
teams and how can we serve you? So we do something at the Way Church that we started with gatekeepers and we just brought it back here. We do something called mental health checks.
mm,
And with that, our leaders are responsible for reaching out to other people or the members of the flock, not to ask them for anything, but just to check on them. And the response that I've been getting from men when they're getting phone calls that are not centered around what you can do for the church, but what the church can do for you, it has
mm.
changed the narrative of how they see church and it's healing wounds.
I love that. No, Peter, you're right. Yeah, we've been talking so much this season about what men need specifically to feel connected, right? And then you just
Yeah.
need to say, don't necessarily use me for my tools and my my strength and my, even the idea of saying we need to be making sure that we're taking care of their hearts, their souls, their minds, and making sure that they are
Yeah.
equipped, right? Support that they need. And something you said earlier too, and I don't want to miss this for folks because that was so powerful when you said that leadership piece that we're missing even for our sons and those that are following. And I know you and I were just joking because for some reason I thought you had one of each, and you were like,
Mhm.
no, I got two boys. And so that father piece, because a lot of times in churches too, our men in leadership become the surrogate fathers. They become
Yeah.
the grandfathers, the uncles. And not that that's a bad thing. I think that's a great thing. But it also goes back to when we only have a handful, we
Yeah.
do even wear them out by relying on them and needing them to step in the roles that they weren't necessarily called to do.
Yeah. Very
But
true.
we're needing that. Mhm.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say I agree completely with that. And I even with pastoring such a young church, I'm noticing a trend and a pattern where I'm stepping up not just as a pastor to a lot of people, but as a father. And
Mhm.
it can get burdensome, but just to speak to any pastor or any leader that may be listening to this and you're stepping into that position of fathering people that you didn't necessarily bring into this world, I would honestly say respect the boundaries that of these relationships and
Mm,
make sure that you're putting it back into you what you're putting into the
mm,
church. I always tell people this: intentional rest is warfare against burnout. And a lot of our men that are remaining burnt out, they're
mhm.
tired. And the warfare comes from, and I may get in trouble here, Dr. Stacy, so I'm sorry ahead of time.
Nah, there's
But
other that's in trouble.
a,
You go ahead.
a lot of the men that are in church are not great examples of men because of,
Mm,
well, let's just do it. Just the feminine nature in men in church. And
mm,
because men, the Bible even speaks to how God feels about when men become effeminate. And so I think because there's not an example of godly masculinity, men are running to other religions.
mm,
Because at least if I'm with a group of Muslims, the masculinity approved. At least if I'm with the Hebrew Israelites, my masculinity will be validated. But when I step into the church, I see somebody moving,
mm,
looking, and acting just like my grandmother. but they're built like me. And so because I don't see the connection. And I wasn't raised, let me say this right. I wasn't raised in church. I was raised around church.
Mm.
My dad started going to church when I was younger, but I wasn't raised by my dad. I was raised by my grandmother. And so she didn't make us go to church. So I got saved at 16, but my experience of coming back to church was when I was 15. And so my issue with the church as a 15-year-old man or boy at that point felt like a man because I was raised in the inner city, raised around gun violence and a bunch of other things was I didn't trust the men of the church because they act more like my aunties than they did my fathers. And so it made me want to run for a season. So I think what God is really trying to do in this season is bring holy masculinity back to the church, not the masculinity that subjects women to not being able to speak and all of that other stuff, but just the masculinity that says, that's the type of man I want to be. I always tell people my goal as a father is to be the man I want my sons to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's missing from the church, a pastor that will say, I want to be the man that other men will say I want to be.
Yes. And that goes back to that whole discipleship, right? Like, again, so I'm going to stay on this holy masculinity thing because I think that's going to be something.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I love because we're talking about even in podcasts and people are talking about relationships and femininity and masculinity and
Mm-hmm.
relationships, even this idea of holy masculinity and being able to see that play out in the church. Because a lot of teenagers, and I speak to teenagers as a therapist every day, and they'll say things like, there are not men in our church. They're not
Mm-hmm.
anybody that I can relate to in my church that even looks like me, right? Or comes from the same background as me. And you have a younger church, even if you just mentioned. Tell us a little bit, I guess, even the challenges of generations and how do you develop even reaching younger people? Because you do have some incredibly neat, I think, amazing outreach. Like you said, missions type outreach.
Yeah, I think so. Just dealing with holy masculinity as a whole and making sure it doesn't become toxic masculinity. One of the things I teach the guys at my church is the strength of gentleness, right? And so, one with that, so Jesus was, I think, one of the toughest people I've ever read about in my life. I think he had to be like 6'3", 6'4" with muscles because nobody messed with him. He was a big guy. I know he was. He was flipping tables. He was yelling at people. He literally told somebody, let the dead bury the dead. Like,
Exactly.
he was very about his business, yet at the same time, he tells us be strong and courageous. And he says, let your gentleness be evident to all. And so I teach them, be gentle, but be firm. And then another part of masculinity, leading through service. Men are providers. I always tell my men at the church, don't be upset when you're being used. I think that's maybe a whole nother conversation, but I think we've kind of put a misconception on what it means to be used. Anything that was created for a purpose should be used. The problem is when you misuse it, because that's abuse, right? Abnormal use of what it was created for. And so never let anybody abuse or misuse, but count it an honor to be used. So I always say we don't serve because we have to, we serve because we get to. And Dr. Stacy, this may be a whole nother conversation too, but holy masculinity looks like emotional honesty. We've pitched this terrible doctrine that men should be so masculine that they're not honest with how they feel. And I think this is why we're losing men too, because if I can't cry in peace, I'll never be able to lead with joy. Every man that I've read about in the Bible that had any type of power had a moment of tears. Jesus, David, Paul, they all showed their vulnerability, yet their masculinity was never questioned because their work was proven.
Listen, I'm just going to let people let that set in for a second. Ooh, when you just said every man, tears. And yes, we tell the boys don't cry. Absolutely.
We do. We do. I was guilty. I was guilty. My son fell the other day. I said, get up. What are you crying for? You a man. And then I thought about it. I said, he's crying because it's pain.
It hurts. That's right.
And he's asking for someone, his tears. This is what the Holy Spirit said to me. He said, Durell, his tears is a question that he doesn't know how to voice. How do I alleviate this pain, Dad?
His communication language.
Yeah. And so instead of looking at it as weakness, I saw it as communication, and it created an avenue to be a father and not a master. Right. And so I'm not going to beat you for your affliction. I'm going to heal you with love and then teach you how to handle it later.
So that has been, and I love how you just said that, because one of my sticking points in my book that I wrote, Powerful Peaceful Parenting, I talk about the fact that we can discipline without the rod. And in so many ways, we have so much information. And I know that's controversial
Mhm.
too, right? Somebody just turned me off because they're like, what do you mean? But there are moments where discipline is a conversation. Discipline is, let me show you my kindness and my love. Jesus did not discipline everyone that he met in the way that the law was written,
Yeah,
right? And so, well, what would Jesus do? Well, he didn't pull out the rod every time,
yeah,
right? So that part, right? I mean, the woman at the well, I mean, listen, we weren't even supposed to be talking and having conversation with her, and yet we were. And that's the longest passage of Jesus talking to someone. So she didn't get what she deserved, right? And so I
yeah.
love that idea of the fact that even bringing that gentleness into our father-son relationship and being able to see that as still holy masculinity. That was a beautiful example.
Absolutely. And I love that piece of correction. I'll say it like this. I believe all correction requires a rod, but I don't think we fully understand what God meant by the rod, right? Because we all know what David says. He says, "Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me."
Certainly.
And so when we look at the standpoint of the shepherd, Jesus corrected people. Moses corrected the people, and he had a rod. He lifted it up, he separated the Red Sea with it, but we never saw him beating people with it,
That part.
right? And so the rod is the standard. So I correct you with a standard.
Mhm.
And so I think if, as fathers,
Absolutely.
as leaders, if we learn how to put standard in place, my
Mhm.
children, they understand that if you want to do our normal weekend routine of you going to the park or you going to Five Below if it's raining or something like that, all week long, there's a standard that has to be met. And so my discipline doesn't have to be physical, but it does have to be literal.
Yes.
And so I stand on my word. You didn't keep up your end of the bargain. So I'm not going to abuse you with distance, but I am going to let you know you don't get
Mhm.
pleasure because you didn't work. Because the Bible says a man that doesn't work doesn't eat. So you don't
Eat.
get to eat the fruit of what dad worked for all week when you didn't put the work in.
Hey,
So
listen.
I think the rod is the standard, not necessarily the abuse of beatings.
That's where people, right, misinterpretation of the word. But again, if that's all we're teaching from the pulpit is the rod equals the belt that equals a beating, then we don't understand the prevention part of correction and setting standards. And even when you said earlier strategy, because I do love how you said that, being intentional about even strategy and what that looks like for our men in church. How do we as communities get men back in church? What do we do?
I love that. As a community, how do we get men back in church? And I think a piece of the answer is in that question. And that's just it, community. We have to get back into these communities. The church has been hijacked by four walls, microphones, speakers, and in my community, a good shout and a good hoop. If you can do that and get a decent offering, they deem that as successful ministry. We get the men back by going to where they are. And we have to go back in these streets. We have to go back, as I like to call it, the trenches, whatever that looks like. And we have to be real and open and then meet the need of the man before we try to introduce them to the God of this man, right? And so when we go out and
Right,
do
right.
outreach, I never start conversations with condemnation. And I think the church is really good at that, telling people what they're doing
Mhm.
wrong, not how
Yeah.
much God loves them in their wrong.
Mhm.
And so the major strategy is just changing our language, making the church something that's welcoming for men again, and
Mhm.
allowing men to have a safe place to fall and not be ridiculed for it.
Mhm. And I just go back to my days at church. I remember our pastor would play chess. And, after service, there'd be men there. I mean, again, not card games, but chess and
Mhm.
strategy. And, just the idea of saying, how do we, right, going out to them brings back that mission piece, right? That we
Mhm.
have to be intentional. The mission being, we want to see Black men in our churches because our churches do need that. They need the leadership. I always tease that you can find more men at the gym than we can at church, right? On Sunday
Yeah.
morning. And not that I'm going to start going to the gym to find me my next husband, but I'm just saying, it's like,
At
that's
least you know they
ministry,
be in
right?
shape.
Like,
It might be.
and that's true too. They all got, well, okay, that's a whole nother session. That's a whole nother session. But Pastor Durell, I love, because I know when you and I spoke, even like our pre-show, talking about like, and what you just said again, being able to go back out in the streets
Yeah,
and being able to talk to people in their moment of need, but also not condemning them, because that
yeah,
condemnation, right, to say, oh, you're living in sin, or you're this, you're doing that. Even though I joke with these guys about being spiritual, I'm just like, oh, I just need you in church, right?
right.
And you don't have to be church, right? Like you can listen at home. You can, if I need you in your word, I need you praying, and I need you, in some way, shape, or form. But I do think, and our mission has to be intentional about reaching the whole family. Because what you said earlier, even if our messaging is more geared towards women, because we know women are traditionally coming to church, and I do feel a lot of pastors have moved into that. Let's talk to the single women space. Let's talk to the ladies in the
Very
church.
true.
Then the message doesn't land on me if I'm a male coming to your church.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even going back to that gym piece, shameless
Oh,
plug.
yeah, listen.
Yeah, because I'm proud of me. This year alone, since January, I've lost 80 pounds in the gym. And thank you. But it dealt with a piece that I didn't feel like was being tended to in the church. And it was the
Mm,
inner wounds and the mental health issues that I was having as a man. And so
wow.
I went to the gym to deal with my mental health. And so a lot of people's like, oh, you took your health serious. I did, but it wasn't my physical health that had me in the gym. It was my mental health. And it was because I had to get in a place where I had to abase my flesh and beat myself into subjection, like Paul says, in order to get to that place. So I think the church could genuinely benefit from mental, emotional, and spiritual health based conversations without shame.
Mhm.
I think if we can do that, and that can be as simple as partnering with counselors, doing what we do, mental health checks, hosting forums. The Bible says, Psalms, I believe it's 147:3, it says, He healed the brokenhearted and He binds up their wounds. God's major strategy to
Yes.
heal men
Mhm.
was to mend their parts and deal with their wounds. And I'll be quick with this last piece. Because there was the generational gap where fathers were missing, we have to deal with the little boys that are
Mm,
still in these men
yeah.
to build them as men. I went through a 2 year process where I believe that I grew up from the 3 year old boy I was when my mother left me, the
Mm,
5 year old boy I was when DIFUS or CPS now took me from my father and placed me in custody I didn't want to be in. And within a 2 year period
mhm.
of just accountability, mentors, and maturity, I feel like I grew up from a 5 year old to a 32-year-old man in just that course by having other men around me that challenged me beyond my comfort and my emotions. So I think if we deal with their inner wounds, they'll come back to know God.
I love that. Well, you just set it up because I was going to hit you. So, my final question here, thinking about healing men and spiritual wellness, or any kind of tip for men in spiritual wellness, and then what advice would you give to those of us raising sons to help support their spiritual wellness?
Love it. I think for men to the biggest tip I can give you is that therapy is not weakness. You need a pastor and a therapist. Truth of the matter is, we put an unfair weight on pastors to do stuff that they're not trained to do. They may be great preachers,
Mm,
but that doesn't make them great therapists. You have to talk to somebody who has studied the mind, studied the human. And so if you would submit yourself to therapy, everything else will work out in your favor. I'm proof. My life has changed because of therapy. I'm a different father. I'm a different husband because of therapy. And for every parent that has young men, I would honestly say, in order to create a healthy man, give that young boy space to speak their mind and grow confidence in their own opinion. A lot of times, for conformity
mm,
purposes, and honestly, for the peace of parents who are overloaded by work and life, we shut up these boys. We tell them, don't speak, don't say this, don't do this. And they never develop the confidence they need to be men. So then they become models of what they saw, which is really a wife, a
mm.
mom. And if we don't let them develop their own confidence, I'm a big advocate. My sons, they're only 10 and 7, but if we go to a restaurant, I don't order for them. You talk to the waiter, you talk to the waitress, because I want you to find your voice. So by the time you're my age, you don't have to build confidence. You are confident. So let them speak. Let them voice their opinion. Let them develop as men, and you'll be shocked what they become as leaders.
Oh man, I already know we're gonna have another show on something, because you just hit some gems in this one, and we're gonna have another show on this
I
one.
can't wait. This was fun.
All right, so Pastor Durell, here we go. Before we leave, though, I love having a Laffy Taffy joke moment, right? Take us back to the day.
I'm excited for
Proverbs
this.
17:22, a joyful heart is good medicine. So again, I always tell people wellness is all areas of wellness. So here we go. All right. What did one eye say to the other? What did one eye, like your physical face eye, say to the
What did
other?
one eye say to the other? I
Mhm.
do not know. I don't know.
It said, between us, something smells.
Oh my gosh. I'm stealing that dad joke. That's exactly what that is, a dad joke. I'm stealing.
And it's funny. Listen, I say to everybody, it just brings us back to the day we used to sit on the porch and eat Laffy Taffy and tell jokes, right? So I
I
love it.
love
All
it.
right, Pastor. So, how can people get in touch with you, learn about the Way Church, give your handles, your socials, whatever? How can they reach out to you?
Absolutely. If you wanted to follow me personally, all of my social media platforms are PD Robinson underscore. PD Robinson underscore. Follow the ministry at The Way in J on Instagram. And you can always, if you wanted to book us or have conversations, you can always hit up the email address admin@thewayinj.org. Just a quick plug. You can check out our website, thewayinj.org. We do have a conference coming up in October that's going to be amazing. And we will also be celebrating the re-release of my book, The Power of the Second Seat, and launching the Second Seat Academy. So some big things are happening. I look forward to partnering with all of you and connect with me and let's grow.
I love it. All right. So before we leave the show, you guys know I love the babies well. Our segment today, Ephesians 2:8. For it is by grace you've been saved through faith. It is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God. Back in the day, Sunday was sacred. We all lived at church on Sunday. You ate several meals there in the back of the church, and naturally, community happened. Boys were mentored, nurtured, supported by older men in the church. The church elders were often feared and reverenced, even more so than their own fathers at times. And even those men stepped in for the fatherless. Men are needed for churches to continue to grow. And as Pastor Durell said today, we need fathers that lead by example, that go to church, not just when it's convenient or when it's a holiday, but going for our weekly dose of spiritual wellness that makes a difference in the lives of our sons and the lives of those that are relying on us. Thanks everybody for tuning in to the Dr. Stacy Show. Until next time, keep the faith, love the babies well, and pursue wellness.